Chapter 1. Chaos Unleashed. The Celestial Voyager, a marvel of engineering and technology, glided through the inky blackness of space with a grace that belied its immense size. Millions of beings from countless worlds called this colossal vessel home, living and working in harmony as they embarked on an odyssey to explore the vast unknown. Deep within the heart of the ship, Lieutenant Ava Kerensky sat hunched over her workstation, her brow furrowed in concentration. The soft glow of the monitors illuminated her features, casting shadows that danced across her face as she pored over the intricate schematics of the Voyager's complex systems. Ava's fingers danced across the keyboard, inputting commands with a practiced ease born from years of dedicated study. She had always found solace in the orderly world of mathematics and engineering, a realm where variables could be controlled and outcomes predicted with precision. A sudden tremor rippled through the deck, jarring Ava from her reverie. Her eyes widened as the alarms began to blare, their shrill tones cutting through the silence like a knife. "What the?" Ava muttered, her fingers flying across the console as she attempted to diagnose the issue. The doors to the engineering bay slid open, and a towering figure strode in, exuding an aura of authority that commanded attention. Captain Valen Draconis, a veteran explorer with a reputation for unconventional methods, surveyed the scene with a critical eye. "Kerensky!" Valen barked, his voice cutting through the cacophony of alarms. "What's happening?" Ava turned to face her commanding officer, her expression a mixture of fear and determination. "I'm not sure, sir," she replied, her voice steady, despite the tension that coursed through her veins. "The readings are all over the place. It's like something is interfering with the core systems." Another tremor rocked the ship, more violent than the last, causing the deck plates to groan in protest. Valen steadied himself against the bulkhead, his jaw set in a grim line. "Well, we can't just sit here and wait for whatever this is to blow us to kingdom come," he growled. "I need answers, Lieutenant, and I need them fast." Ava nodded, her fingers already flying across the console as she delved deeper into the diagnostic routines. Her mind raced, analyzing every scrap of data, searching for the elusive clue that would unlock the mystery of the Voyager's distress. Suddenly a warning flashed across her screen, and Ava felt her breath catch in her throat. "Captain," she said, her voice tinged with a sense of urgency that belied her normally reserved demeanor. "I think we've been sabotaged." Valen's eyes narrowed and he stepped closer, leaning over Ava's shoulder to study the readouts. "Explain," he demanded, his tone brooking no argument. Ava swallowed hard, her mind racing as she tried to put the pieces together. "There are traces of an unauthorized override in the core systems," she began. "It's like someone has manually overridden the safeguards and is attempting to destabilize the reactor." Valen's expression darkened, and he slammed his fist against the bulkhead, his frustration palpable. "Damn it," he growled. "We've got a saboteur on board, and they're playing for keeps." Ava felt a chill run down her spine at the implication of his words. To willfully endanger the lives of millions was an act of unfathomable malice, and she found herself struggling to comprehend the motivations behind such a heinous act. Another tremor rocked the ship, more violent than the last, and Ava heard the ominous groan of stressed metal echoing through the corridors. Time was running out, and they needed to act fast. "What do we do, sir?" she asked, her voice betraying a hint of the fear that gripped her. Valen's gaze met hers, and she saw a steely resolve burning in his eyes. "We stop them, Lieutenant," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Whatever it takes, we stop them before they bring this whole damn ship down around our ears." Ava nodded, her hands already moving across the console as she initiated emergency protocols. This was no longer just a matter of engineering or technical expertise. It was a battle for survival, and Ava knew that she would have to dig deeper than she ever had before, tapping into reserves of courage and determination she never knew she possessed. As the alarms continued to wail, Ava felt a newfound sense of purpose take root within her. She was no longer just a cog in the machine. a nameless engineer lost in the vastness of the Voyager. She was a protector, a guardian of the lives that depended on her actions. With a deep breath, she turned to Valen, her eyes alight with a fire that burned brighter than any star. "Lead the way, Captain," she said, her voice steady and resolute. "I'm with you." And so began a journey that would test Ava's mettle in ways she could never have imagined, forging her into a different person, a leader, a warrior, and ultimately a hero. Chapter 2. Unlikely Alliances. The corridors of the Celestial Voyager were a chaos of flashing lights and blaring alarms as Ava and Captain Valen raced through the ship's labyrinthine passageways. The tremors had intensified, each one shaking the deck plates with a violence that threatened to buckle the vessel's superstructure. "We need to get to the central computer core," Valen shouted over the din, his voice tinged with urgency. "If we can isolate the saboteur's override, we might be able to regain control of the systems." Ava nodded, her mind already whirring as she calculated the most efficient path to their destination. "This way," she called, veering down a side corridor that would take them through one of the ship's auxiliary maintenance shafts. As they rounded a corner, Ava's heart leaped into her throat at the sight of a fallen bulkhead blocking their path. Twisted metal and sparking conduits filled the corridor, the aftermath of a violent tremor that had ripped through the Voyager's hull. "Damn it!" Valen cursed, his eyes scanning the wreckage for a way through. "We'll never get past that in time." Ava felt a seed of doubt take root within her, but she quickly quashed it. This was no time for hesitation or fear. Too many lives were at stake. "Wait," she said, her gaze falling upon a narrow access hatch set into the bulkhead. "I think I can squeeze through there." Without waiting for Valen's response, she dropped to her knees and began prying at the hatch with her multi-tool. Valen crouched beside her, his brow furrowed with concern. "Kerensky, are you sure about this? It looks like a tight fit, and who knows what's waiting on the other side." Ava paused, her fingers stilling for a moment as she met Valen's gaze. In that instant, she saw a flicker of something in his eyes, a mixture of respect and admiration that caught her off guard. "I have to try, sir," she replied, her voice steady despite the maelstrom of emotions swirling within her. "If we don't stop this saboteur, none of us will make it out of here alive." Valen held her gaze for a heartbeat longer, then nodded. "All right, Lieutenant, lead the way." With a grunt of effort, Ava pried the hatch open, revealing a narrow crawl space beyond. Without hesitation, she slipped inside, her lithe frame allowing her to maneuver through the tight confines with relative ease. As she crawled, her mind raced, analyzing every potential outcome and contingency. She had always been a creature of logic and reason, but now she found herself relying on instinct and gut feeling as much as cold, hard data. Emerging on the other side of the wreckage, Ava paused to catch her breath, her eyes adjusting to the dim emergency lighting that bathed the corridor in an eerie red glow. "Kerensky," Valen's muffled voice called from the other side of the bulkhead. "You all right over there?" "I'm fine, sir," she replied, her voice echoing off the metal walls. "Just give me a moment to find a way to get you through." As she scanned her surroundings, her gaze fell upon a maintenance hatch set into the floor. With a surge of adrenaline, she pried it open, revealing a cramped access tunnel that ran parallel to the main corridor. "Captain," she called, "there's a tunnel down here. I think you can make your way through and meet me on the other side." There was a pause, and then the sound of Valen's boots clanging against the metal grating as he lowered himself into the tunnel. Ava held her breath, silently willing him to make it through safely. After what felt like an eternity, Valen's weathered face emerged from the hatch, his expression a mixture of relief and grim determination. "Good work, Lieutenant," he said, dusting himself off as he climbed out of the tunnel. "Now, let's go find this saboteur before they—" His words were cut short by the sound of approaching footsteps, echoing down the corridor like the ominous tolling of a bell. Ava felt her heart rate spike as she turned towards the sound, her body tensing in anticipation. From the shadows emerged two figures, their faces obscured by the dim lighting. One was a towering figure, broad-shouldered and imposing, while the other was lithe and slender, moving with a fluid grace that belied a deadly prowess. "Well, well," the larger figure rumbled, his voice deep and gravelly. "Looks like we've got ourselves a pair of heroes." Ava felt a chill run down her spine as she took in the sight of the strangers. Their clothing was worn and battle-scarred, and they carried themselves with the easy confidence of seasoned warriors. Valen stepped forward, his hand resting on the butt of his sidearm. "Who are you?" he demanded. "And what's your business on my ship?" The smaller figure chuckled, a sound that sent a shiver down Ava's spine. "Your ship, Captain? I'm afraid you're sorely mistaken." In a blur of motion, the lithe figure drew a wicked-looking blade from a sheath at her back, the metal gleaming in the dim light. "This ship belongs to us now." Ava's heart pounded in her chest as she realized the gravity of their situation. These weren't just strangers. They were part of the conspiracy that threatened to tear the Voyager apart from within. Without warning, the larger figure charged forward, his massive frame barreling towards Valen like an unstoppable juggernaut. Ava felt her body react on instinct, her mind shifting into a state of hyper-awareness as she scanned her surroundings for anything that could be used as a weapon. Her gaze fell upon a fallen conduit, its metal casing twisted and bent from the earlier tremors. In a fluid motion, she scooped it up, the weight of it lending a reassuring heft to her grip. As the larger figure closed the distance, Ava stepped forward, swinging the makeshift bludgeon with all her might. The conduit connected with a sickening crunch, catching the attacker squarely in the ribs and sending him staggering backwards with a grunt of pain. Ava felt a surge of adrenaline course through her veins, a newfound sense of power and purpose igniting within her. She was no longer just an engineer, a nameless cog in the machine. She was a warrior, a protector, and she would fight with every ounce of her being to defend the Voyager and its inhabitants. Valen, momentarily caught off guard by Ava's unexpected display of force, quickly regained his composure. In a flash he drew his sidearm and levelled it at the lithe figure, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Drop the blade," he growled, his voice laced with a menacing edge. "Or I'll drop you." The smaller figure froze, her eyes narrowing as she weighed her options. For a moment the corridor was deathly silent, the only sound the ragged breathing of the combatants. Then, with a snarl of defiance, the lithe figure launched herself forward, her blade flashing in a deadly arc towards Valen's throat. Ava's heart leaped into her mouth as she watched in horror, her body propelling itself forward without conscious thought. Time seemed to slow to a crawl as Ava interposed herself between Valen and the blade, her makeshift weapon swinging in a desperate parry. Metal screeched against metal as the conduit deflected the lethal strike, sending the attacker's blade skittering across the deck plating. In that moment, something shifted within Ava. A fire ignited in her soul, burning away the last vestiges of her timid, reserved nature and replacing it with an indomitable will forged in the crucible of combat. As the larger figure regained his footing, Ava whirled to face him, her grip tightening on the conduit as she settled into a defensive stance. Valen moved to flank her, his sidearm trained on the lithe figure, who had retrieved her blade and was eyeing them with a mixture of fury and grudging respect. The standoff stretched on, the tension in the corridor thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, from the shadows, a new voice rang out, rich and melodic, yet laced with an undercurrent of steel. "Stand down, Zara Tharik, this isn't the way!" Ava's gaze snapped towards the source of the voice, and she found herself staring into a pair of piercing eyes that seemed to bore into her very soul. A slender figure emerged from the shadows, her features partially obscured by a tattered cloak that billowed around her like smoke. The lithe figure, Zara, hesitated, her blade wavering as she regarded the newcomer with a mixture of surprise and trepidation. "Tali!" she hissed, her voice laced with venom. "What are you doing here? This doesn't concern you." The cloaked figure, Tali, fixed Zara with an unwavering stare, her expression inscrutable. "On the contrary, my dear," she said, her voice carrying a weight of authority that belied her slender frame. This concerns us all. Tali turned her gaze towards Ava and Valen, and Ava felt herself transfixed by the intensity of those eyes. "You seek to stop the saboteur, do you not?" she asked, her words hanging in the air like a challenge. Valen nodded, his grip on his sidearm never wavering. "That's right," he replied, his voice laced with suspicion. "And from the looks of things, you and your friends here are part of the problem." Tali chuckled, a sound that sent a shiver down Ava's spine. "Appearances can be deceiving, Captain," she said, her tone laced with enigmatic amusement. "What if I told you that Zara and Tharik were not the saboteurs you seek, but rather allies in your quest to save this ship?" Ava felt her brow furrow in confusion, her mind struggling to make sense of Tali's words. Could these apparent adversaries truly be potential allies in their desperate struggle? Valen, ever the pragmatist, fixed Tali with a skeptical glare. "And why should we trust you?" he demanded. "For all we know, this is just another trick, another layer of deception." Tali met Valen's gaze unflinchingly, her expression unreadable. "Because, Captain," she said, her voice carrying a weight of conviction that brooked no argument, "if we do not work together, we are all doomed." As those words hung in the air, Ava felt a profound shift within her. The lines between ally and enemy, friend and foe, had blurred beyond recognition. In that moment, she realized that the true battle they faced was not one of physical might, but of unity and cooperation in the face of a threat that threatened to tear them all asunder. With a deep breath, she lowered her makeshift weapon, her gaze flickering between Valen, Tali, and the others. "She's right," she said, her voice steady and resolute. "If we're going to stop this saboteur, we need to put aside our differences and work together." Valen turned towards her, his eyes searching her face for any hint of doubt or hesitation. Finding none, he slowly lowered his sidearm, his expression a mask of grim determination. "All right, Lieutenant," he said, his voice laced with a newfound respect. "I'll trust your judgment on this. But make no mistake," he added, fixing Tali and the others with a steely glare. "If this is some kind of trick, there'll be hell to pay." Tali inclined her head in acknowledgement, a ghost of a smile playing across her lips. "Fair enough, Captain," she said. "Now, let us away. Time grows short, and we have a saboteur to catch." As the unlikely alliance fell into step, Ava felt a surge of pride and purpose swell within her. She had faced her fears head-on, embracing the warrior spirit that had lain dormant within her for so long, and in doing so she had forged the first links, in a chain that would bind them all together in their quest to save the Voyager and unravel the conspiracy that threatened to tear it apart. Chapter 3: Into the Depths. The tension in the air was palpable as Ava, Valen, and their newfound allies made their way through the labyrinthine corridors of the Celestial Voyager. The ship trembled around them, tremors rippling through the decks like the ominous harbingers of a cataclysm yet to come. Tali, their enigmatic guide, led the way, her lithe form slipping through the shadows with a fluid grace that belied her true nature. Ava found herself captivated by the woman's enigmatic presence, her mind churning with 1,000 unanswered questions. "Where are we going?" Valen's gruff voice broke the silence, his tone laced with a mixture of suspicion and impatience. Tali did not break stride, her pace unwavering as she navigated the maze of corridors with an almost preternatural sense of direction. "To the heart of the Voyager," she replied, her voice a melodic whisper that seemed to echo from the very walls around them. "The saboteur's trail leads us deep into the ship's core." Ava felt a chill run down her spine at those words. The core was a place she knew well, a vast, cavernous chamber that housed the Voyager's immense fusion reactors and life support systems. To venture into those depths was to court disaster on a scale she could scarcely fathom. As if sensing her trepidation, Tali turned her piercing gaze towards Ava, a ghost of a smile playing across her lips. "Fear not, Lieutenant," she said, her voice laced with a reassuring warmth. "The core may seem like the domain of machines and twisted metal, but it is also a place of power, a nexus where the strands of fate converge. Ava furrowed her brow, her mind struggling to make sense of Tally's enigmatic words. There was something about this woman, a depth of knowledge and understanding that transcended the boundaries of mere science and engineering. Beside her, Zara and Tharic moved with a fluid grace that spoke of years of combat training. Ava could sense the tension coiled within their bodies, like predators poised to strike at the slightest provocation. "You sure about this, Tali?" Zara's voice was a low growl, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Leading these outsiders into the heart of our operation? It's a risk." Tali did not break stride. Her gaze fixed ahead as she navigated the twisting corridors with unerring precision. "Trust has its place, Zara," she replied, her tone gentle, yet laced with an undercurrent of steel. "But sometimes risks must be taken if we are to avert catastrophe." Zara fell silent, though Ava could see the muscle twitching in her jaw, a testament to the internal struggle raging within the warrior woman. As they pressed deeper into the ship's core, the air grew thick and oppressive, the heat from the reactor systems bleeding through the bulkheads like an ever-present reminder of the power that pulsed at the Voyager's heart. Ava felt the sweat beading on her brow, her breath coming in ragged gasps as they navigated the claustrophobic maintenance tunnels that wound their way through the ship's innards. She was no stranger to the harsh conditions of the core, but there was something different this time, a palpable sense of danger that seemed to permeate the very air around them. Suddenly, Tali came to an abrupt halt, her hand raised in a silent signal for the others to hold their position. Ava strained her senses, trying to discern what had caught the enigmatic woman's attention. Then she heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible hum, like the vibration of a vast machine thrumming with barely contained power. "We're close," Tali breathed, her voice a mere whisper. "The saboteur's trail leads through here." Valen stepped forward, his eyes narrowed as he scanned the cramped confines of the maintenance tunnel. "All right," he said, his voice a low growl. "What's the plan?" Tali turned to face the unlikely alliance, her expression grave. "We split up," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Valen, you and Tharic take the northern access tunnel. Zara, you're with me. We'll approach from the south." Ava felt her heart rate spike at the mention of splitting up. The thought of venturing deeper into the core, separated from the relative safety of their group, set her nerves on edge. As if sensing her trepidation, Tali fixed her with a piercing stare. "And you, Lieutenant," she said, her voice laced with a quiet authority, "you will take the central route. It is the most direct path to the reactor chamber, and the most perilous." Ava opened her mouth to protest, but the words died on her lips as she met Tali's unwavering gaze. In those fathomless depths, she saw something that resonated deep within her soul, a recognition of the strength and resilience that had been forged within her through the crucible of their ordeal. With a slow nod, Ava squared her shoulders, her resolve hardening like tempered steel. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady despite the maelstrom of emotions swirling within her. Valen fixed her with a concerned look, his brow furrowed. "Kerensky, are you sure about this?" he asked, his tone laced with a rare note of paternal concern. "That route is a death trap, even for someone with your skills." Ava met his gaze unflinchingly, her eyes burning with a newfound fire that seemed to catch the grizzled captain off guard. "I'm sure, sir," she replied, her voice ringing with conviction. "If we're going to stop this saboteur, we need to hit them from every angle. I'll find a way through." For a heartbeat, Valen held her gaze, his expression unreadable. Then, with a solemn nod, he turned and headed towards the northern access tunnel, Tharic falling into step beside him. As the others dispersed to their respective entry points, Ava found herself alone in the cramped confines of the maintenance tunnel. The heat was stifling, the air thick with the acrid tang of ozone and scorched metal. Taking a deep breath, Ava steeled her nerves and began to make her way forward, her movements slow and deliberate as she navigated the treacherous terrain. Every step was a calculated risk, each footfall carrying the potential for disaster should she slip or misstep. The journey seemed to stretch on into eternity, the oppressive heat and close confines wearing away at her resolve with each passing moment. More than once, Ava found herself tempted to turn back, to retreat to the relative safety of the ship's more hospitable corridors. But each time that doubt crept in, she conjured the image of Tali's unwavering gaze, the recognition of her inner strength that had kindled a fire within her soul. She was no longer the timid, reserved engineer she had been at the outset of this ordeal. She was a warrior, forged in the crucible of adversity, and she would not falter in the face of this challenge. At last, after what felt like an eternity, Ava emerged into a vast, cavernous chamber that seemed to stretch on into infinity. The reactor core pulsed before her, a vast sphere of contained power that cast a sickly, radioactive glow across the twisted metal and piping that surrounded it. Ava felt her breath catch in her throat at the sheer scale of the chamber, the immensity of the engineering feat that had brought such a marvel into existence. But even as she marvelled at the sight, a sense of unease crept over her, a prickling at the back of her neck that warned of danger lurking in the shadows. Steeling her nerves, Ava pressed forward, her footsteps echoing across the vast expanse as she made her way towards the reactor's core. Every sense was heightened, her body thrumming with a primal alertness as she scanned her surroundings for any sign of movement or threat. Suddenly, a faint sound caught her attention. A scraping, metallic rasp that seemed to emanate from the twisted maze of piping and conduits that surrounded the reactor. Ava froze her heart pounding in her ears as she strained to pinpoint the source of the noise. There it was again, closer this time, accompanied by a faint shuffling that sent a chill down her spine. Someone, or something, was moving through the shadows, stalking her with a predatory patience that spoke of malevolent intent. Ava's grip tightened on the makeshift weapon she had fashioned from a fallen conduit, her knuckles whitening as she prepared to confront whatever threat lay in wait. She was no longer the timid engineer she had been at the outset of this ordeal. She was a warrior, forged in the crucible of adversity, and she would face this challenge head-on, no matter the cost. As the sound drew nearer, Ava felt a surge of adrenaline course through her veins, heightening her senses to a razor's edge. She was ready, poised to strike at the first sign of danger. Then from the shadows a figure emerged, a towering silhouette that seemed to blot out the sickly glow of the reactor core. Ava's breath caught in her throat as she took in the sight before her, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. The figure was humanoid in shape, but that was where the resemblance ended. Its body was a twisted amalgam of flesh and metal, cybernetic enhancements grafted seamlessly onto a muscular frame that radiated menace. Glowing optics burned from the depths of its skull-like visage, casting an eerie crimson glow across the chamber. As the creature stepped forward, Ava felt a surge of primal fear wash over her, a visceral reaction that spoke to the depths of her very being. This was no mere saboteur or renegade operative. This was something far more sinister. A nightmare given form and substance. In that moment, Ava knew that she stood at a crossroads, a pivotal juncture where her path would be irrevocably altered. She could turn and flee, seeking the safety of her allies and abandoning her solitary mission. Or she could stand her ground facing this abomination head-on and embracing the warrior spirit that had been forged within her through the fires of their ordeal. As the creature advanced, its movements fluid and predatory, Ava felt a strange calm settle over her. The fear was still there, a prickling at the back of her mind, but it was tempered by a newfound resolve, a steely determination that burned brighter than the reactor core itself. With a deep breath, Ava settled into a defensive stance, her makeshift weapon held at the ready. She was no longer the timid, reserved engineer she had been at the outset of this journey. She was a warrior, a protector, and she would defend the Voyager and all that she held dear with every ounce of her being. "Come on, then," she growled, her voice laced with a defiant edge that seemed to give the creature pause. "Let's see what you've got." As the creature surged forward, Ava braced herself for the inevitable clash, her mind focused and her body poised to strike. This was her crucible, her moment of truth, and she would emerge from it forged anew. A true warrior, tempered by the fires of adversity and ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Chapter 4. Crucible of Fire. The creature's movements were a blur, its cybernetic enhancements lending it an otherworldly speed and grace that belied its massive frame. Ava barely had time to react as it closed the distance between them, its clawed appendages slashing through the air with lethal precision. Instinct took over, honed by the crucible of their ordeal, and Ava twisted her body in a desperate evasion. The creature's strike missed by a hair's breadth, the razor-sharp talons rending the air where she had been standing mere moments before. Ava's heart thundered in her chest as she pivoted, her makeshift weapon sweeping in a wide arc towards the creature's midsection. Metal screeched against metal as the conduit connected with the cybernetic plating that covered the creature's torso, sending a shockwave of force reverberating through her arms. The creature staggered back, a guttural snarl escaping from the depths of its skull-like visage. Ava allowed herself a fleeting moment of satisfaction, a sense of triumph at having landed the first blow. But her moment of triumph was short-lived, as the creature regained its footing, its glowing optics burning with a malevolent fury that sent a chill down her spine. In that instant, Ava realized that she was facing no mere mindless automaton. This creature was possessed of a twisted intelligence, a cunning that elevated it far above the ranks of a simple saboteur or renegade agent. "You fight well, little one," the creature rasped, its voice a grating amalgam of mechanical distortion and something far more unsettling, a cold, predatory intelligence that seemed to bore into her very soul. "But you are outmatched, and your struggle is futile." Ava felt a surge of defiance rise within her, a fire that burned brighter than the reactor core itself. She would not be cowed by this abomination, nor would she surrender to the fear that threatened to overwhelm her senses. "We'll see about that," she snarled, settling into a defensive stance once more. The creature regarded her with what almost seemed like amusement, its optics flickering with a sinister light. "Such bravado," it mocked. "But bravery alone will not save you, little one. You are but a speck in the grand design, a mere footnote in the annals of history." Ava's grip tightened on her makeshift weapon, her knuckles whitening with the strain. "And what grand design would that be?" she spat, her voice laced with contempt. "Destroying this ship and everyone on board? You're a monster, plain and simple." The creature threw back its head and unleashed a grating approximation of laughter, the sound sending shivers down Ava's spine. "Monster? No, little one, you misunderstand. I am an agent of evolution, a harbinger of the future that awaits us all." With a fluid motion, the creature unfurled a set of metallic appendages from its back, the air humming with barely contained energy as they crackled to life. This ship, this pathetic collection of flesh and steel, is but a stepping stone on the path to transcendence. You cling to your fragile bodies, your fleeting lives, when the true power lies in shedding such weaknesses and embracing the perfection of the machine. Ava felt her stomach churn at the creature's words, a profound sense of revulsion washing over her. This was no mere saboteur or renegade agent. This was a harbinger of something far more sinister, a twisted ideology that sought to eradicate all that she held dear. "You're insane," she spat, her grip tightening on her weapon as she braced herself for the inevitable clash. The creature seemed to sense her resolve, its optics burning with a malevolent hunger that sent a chill down her spine. "Insanity is a matter of perspective, little one," it hissed. "But enough talk. Let us see if your mettle matches your bravado." With a sudden burst of movement, the creature surged forward, its cybernetic appendages crackling with barely contained energy. Ava felt the hair on the back of her neck stand on end, as the air around her seemed to grow charged with static electricity, her every nerve ending aflame with the primal instinct to fight or flee. But there was no fleeing, not this time. This was her crucible, her moment of reckoning, and she would face it head-on, no matter the cost. Ava pivoted, her makeshift weapon sweeping in a wide arc as she sought to catch the creature off guard. But her strike was met with a blinding flash of energy as one of the creature's appendages lashed out, intercepting the conduit and sending it clattering across the deck plating. Ava felt a surge of panic grip her as she found herself disarmed, her only weapon torn from her grasp with contemptuous ease. The creature loomed over her, its massive frame casting a menacing shadow that seemed to blot out the sickly glow of the reactor core. "Foolish child," the creature growled, its voice dripping with disdain. "Did you truly believe you could stand against the inevitability of progress? Your feeble resistance is but a fleeting irritant, soon to be swept aside by the inexorable tide of evolution." Ava backpedaled, her mind racing as she sought any advantage, any opening that might offer a glimmer of hope. But the creature was relentless, its appendages lashing out with blinding speed, forcing her into a desperate retreat. As she stumbled, her back colliding with the unyielding metal of a bulkhead, Ava felt a surge of despair threaten to overwhelm her. This was it, the end of her journey, the final crucible she would never overcome. But as she stared into the burning gaze of the creature, something stirred within her, a flickering ember of defiance that refused to be extinguished. She was Ava Kerensky, lieutenant and protector of the Celestial Voyager. She had faced down the demons of her own fear and doubt, emerging forged anew in the fires of adversity. And she would not go quietly into the night. With a snarl of defiance, Ava launched herself forward, her body propelled by a primal fury that burned brighter than the reactor core itself. The creature seemed taken aback by her sudden burst of aggression, its appendages momentarily thrown into disarray. Ava seized her opportunity, her fists lashing out in a flurry of strikes that hammered against the creature's cybernetic plating. Each blow was fueled by the fire that raged within her, a furnace of determination that refused to be quenched. The creature staggered under the onslaught, its movements growing sluggish and uncoordinated as Ava's relentless assault overwhelmed its defenses. With a final, desperate surge, she threw her entire weight into a vicious haymaker that connected squarely with the creature's skull-like visage. There was a sickening crunch of metal and a burst of sparks as the creature's optics flickered and died, its towering frame crashing to the deck in a heap of twisted machinery. Ava stood over the fallen abomination, her chest heaving with exertion as the adrenaline coursed through her veins. She had faced the crucible head-on and emerged victorious, her spirit tempered in the fires of battle and her resolve forged anew. As the echoes of the battle faded, Ava became aware of a sound, a slow, rhythmic clapping that seemed to emanate from the shadows surrounding the reactor core. From the gloom, a familiar figure emerged, her tattered cloak billowing around her like smoke caught in an unseen breeze. "Well done, Lieutenant," Tally's rich voice carried across the chamber, laced with a note of approval that sent a surge of pride swelling in Ava's chest. "You have faced your demons and emerged triumphant, a true warrior forged in the fires of adversity." Ava opened her mouth to respond, but the words seemed to catch in her throat as she beheld the enigmatic woman before her. There was a depth to Tali's gaze, a weight of knowledge and understanding that transcended mere mortal boundaries. What was that thing?" she managed, gesturing towards the fallen creature at her feet. Tali's expression grew somber, her features etched with a gravity that belied her slender frame. "A harbinger, Lieutenant," she replied, her voice laced with a somber note. "A twisted amalgam of flesh and machine, born of a dark ideology that seeks to supplant the natural order with cold, unfeeling perfection." Ava felt a chill run down her spine at Tali's words, the implications of what she had faced sinking in like a lead weight in the pit of her stomach. "But we stopped it," she said, her voice tinged with a note of uncertainty. "Didn't we?" Tali fixed her with a piercing stare, her eyes seeming to bore into Ava's very soul. "This was but a skirmish, Lieutenant," she said, her tone grave. "The true battle lies ahead, a conflict that will test the very limits of your resolve and courage." As if on cue, the chamber rumbled around them, a deep, ominous tremor that shook the deck plates and sent a shower of sparks cascading from the twisted wreckage of the fallen creature. Ava felt her heart rate spike, her body tensing in anticipation of a fresh onslaught. But Tali remained calm, her gaze fixed on a distant point beyond the reactor core. "They come," she breathed, her voice laced with a somber certainty that sent a chill down Ava's spine. From the shadows, more figures began to emerge, their forms twisted and warped by the same dark fusion of flesh and machine that had given rise to Ava's fallen adversary. They moved with a fluid grace that belied their monstrous forms, encircling the reactor core like a pack of wolves closing in on their prey. Ava felt a surge of fear grip her, a primal instinct that urged her to flee from the nightmare that was unfolding before her eyes. But she stood her ground, her fists clenched at her sides, as she prepared to face this fresh onslaught. She was no longer the timid, reserved engineer she had been at the outset of this odyssey. She was a warrior, tempered in the crucible of battle, and forged anew in the fires of adversity. And she would face this challenge head-on no matter the cost, for the sake of the Voyager and all those who called it home. As the abominations closed in, their appendages crackling with barely contained energy, Ava felt a sense of calm settle over her. This was her moment, her ultimate test, and she would meet it with the unwavering courage and resolve that had been forged within her through the trial she had endured. With a deep breath, she settled into a defensive stance, her eyes blazing with a fire that seemed to give the approaching monstrosities pause. And as Tali stepped up beside her, the enigmatic woman's presence lending her strength, Ava knew that she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The battle was far from over, but she was no longer the same person she had been at its outset. She was a warrior reborn, tempered in the crucible of fire, and ready to face the darkness that threatened to consume them all. Chapter 5. Crucible of Unity. The abominations surged forward, their twisted forms writhing with a grotesque parody of life as they closed in on Ava and Tali. Ava felt her heart pounding in her chest, a primal rhythm that seemed to echo the thunderous footfalls of the monstrosities that surrounded them. "Stand your ground, Lieutenant!" Tali's voice cut through the din, laced with a calm authority that belied the gravity of their situation. "They may wield the power of twisted science, but we possess something far greater, the indomitable strength of unity and purpose." Ava nodded, her jaw set in a grim line as she settled into a defensive stance. She could feel the energy crackling in the air, the static charge of the abomination's cybernetic enhancements raising the hair on the back of her neck. The first wave struck like a thunderbolt, their appendages lashing out with blinding speed and lethal force. Ava pivoted, her body moving with a fluid grace born of instinct and hard-won experience, deflecting the initial barrage with a series of deft parries and evasions. Beside her, Tali was a blur of motion, her tattered cloak swirling around her like a living thing as she danced through the melee. With a flick of her wrist, a blade seemed to materialize in her hand, its razor-sharp edge gleaming in the sickly glow of the reactor core. Ava's eyes widened as she caught sight of the weapon, a sense of awe mingling with her trepidation. "What in the—" Tali spared her a sidelong glance, a ghost of a smile playing across her features. "A gift from an old friend," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the cacophony of battle. "A symbol of the legacy we fight to preserve." Before Ava could process the enigmatic woman's words, a fresh wave of abominations surged towards them, their appendages crackling with barely contained energy. Ava braced herself, her body coiling like a spring as she prepared to meet the onslaught head-on. But before the first blow could land, a familiar figure interposed itself between Ava and the approaching threat. Zara, her lithe form moving with the fluid grace of a seasoned warrior, deflected the initial strikes with a flurry of parries and counter-strikes that left Ava's head spinning. "Didn't think you'd start the party without us, did you?" Zara quipped, her voice laced with a savage grin as she pressed the advantage, her blade slicing through the air with lethal precision. From the shadows emerged Valen and Tharik, the grizzled captain's sidearm barking in a staccato rhythm as he laid down a blistering hail of covering fire. Ava felt a surge of relief wash over her as their unlikely alliance reassembled, a bulwark of defiance against the tide of nightmarish horrors that sought to overwhelm them. "Took you long enough," she shouted, her voice barely audible over the din of battle. Valen flashed her a wolfish grin, his eyes alight with a feral intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. "Had to take the scenic route," he growled. "These bastards don't make it easy." As the battle raged around them, Ava found herself drawn into the maelstrom, her body moving with a preternatural grace born of instinct and hard-won experience. She was no longer the timid engineer she had been at the outset of this odyssey, but a warrior forged in the crucible of adversity, her resolve tempered by the fires of combat. With each blow she deflected, each abomination she turned aside, Ava felt a surge of power coursing through her veins. This was her moment, her crucible, and she would face it head-on, her spirit burning brighter than the reactor core itself. Beside her, Tali seemed to move with an almost otherworldly grace, her blade weaving intricate patterns through the air as she danced through the melee. Ava couldn't help but marvel at the enigmatic woman's prowess, a sense of awe mingling with the adrenaline that flooded her system. "How are you doing that?" she called out, her voice strained with exertion as she parried a vicious strike from one of the abominations. Tali spared her a sidelong glance, her expression inscrutable. "The blade is but a tool, Lieutenant," she replied, her words laced with a weight of knowledge that transcended mere mortal boundaries. It is the wielder's intent that gives it true power. Before Ava could process the enigmatic woman's words, a fresh wave of abominations surged towards them, their appendages crackling with barely contained energy. Ava braced herself, her muscles coiling like springs as she prepared to meet the onslaught head-on. But as the first blow descended, she felt a surge of energy wash over her, a palpable force that seemed to emanate from the very air around them. Tali's form shimmered, her tattered cloak billowing outward as if caught in an unseen gale, and Ava found herself enveloped in a shimmering cocoon of pure, radiant energy. The abomination's strike glanced off the shimmering barrier with a shower of sparks, its appendage recoiling, as if burned by the sheer intensity of the force that had deflected it. Ava gaped in awe, her mind struggling to process what she had just witnessed. What was that?" she breathed, her words laced with a mixture of wonder and trepidation. Tali fixed her with a piercing stare, her eyes seeming to bore into Ava's very soul. "A gift, Lieutenant," she replied, her voice laced with a somber gravity. "A manifestation of the power that lies within us all, if only we have the courage to embrace it." As the battle raged around them, Ava found herself drawn deeper into the crucible, her body moving with a preternatural grace born of instinct and hard-won experience. She could feel the energy pulsing through her veins, a wellspring of power that seemed to flow from the very fabric of the universe itself. With each blow she deflected, each abomination she turned aside, Ava felt a surge of unity coursing through her, a profound connection to her comrades that transcended metaphysical boundaries. They were no longer a disparate band of misfits and outcasts, but a cohesive force, bound together by a common purpose and a shared determination to defend all that they held dear. Zara and Theric moved in perfect harmony, their blades weaving intricate patterns through the air as they cut a swathe through the ranks of the abominations. Valen's sidearm barked in a staccato rhythm, his aim true and unwavering, as he laid down a blistering hail of covering fire. And at the heart of it all, Tali stood like a nexus of raw, unbridled power, her form shimmering with the radiant energy that had deflected the abomination's onslaught. Ava could feel the woman's presence like a beacon, a wellspring of strength and resolve that seemed to bolster her own reserves. As the battle raged on, Ava found herself drawn inexorably towards Tali, her movements guided by an instinct that transcended mere physical boundaries. She could feel the energy pulsing around them, a living, breathing force that seemed to bind them all together in a profound, almost spiritual union. With a sudden surge of insight, Ava reached out, her hand extending towards Tali's shimmering form. The enigmatic woman regarded her with a knowing gaze, her eyes shining with a depth of understanding that sent a shiver down Ava's spine. "Yes, Lieutenant," Tali breathed, her voice carrying a weight of conviction that seemed to resonate through Ava's very soul. "Embrace the unity, the interconnectedness that binds us all. Let it flow through you and know the true power of cohesion." As if guided by an unseen force, Ava's hand made contact with the shimmering barrier that surrounded Tali. And in that instant, she felt a surge of energy unlike anything she had ever experienced. It was as if a dam had burst within her, unleashing a torrent of power that flooded her senses and heightened her awareness to a razor's edge. She could feel the energy pulsing through her comrades, a living tapestry of interconnected threads that wove them all together into a cohesive whole. Their movements, once disparate and uncoordinated, took on a fluid grace, a harmony that transcended mere physical boundaries. Zara and Tharik seemed to move as one, their blades weaving intricate patterns that deflected the abomination's strikes with effortless precision. Valen's aim became unerring, each shot finding its mark with lethal accuracy as he cut a swathe through the ranks of the twisted monstrosities. And at the center of it all, Ava stood, her form aglow with the radiant energy that had enveloped her. She could feel the power coursing through her veins, a wellspring of strength and resolve that seemed to flow from the very fabric of the universe itself. With a primal roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the reactor chamber, Ava unleashed a torrent of energy, a blinding maelstrom of pure, unbridled power that swept through the ranks of the abominations like a force of nature. The twisted monstrosities recoiled, their cybernetic enhancements sparking and sputtering as the energy wave washed over them. Ava could feel the sheer weight of their collective malevolence, a seething miasma of hatred and twisted ideology that threatened to overwhelm her senses. But she did not falter, her spirit burning brighter than the reactor core itself as she channeled the boundless energy that flowed through her. This was her crucible, her moment of transcendence, and she would face it head-on, her resolve forged in the fires of unity and tempered by the bonds of camaraderie that bound her to her comrades. As the energy wave dissipated, Ava found herself surrounded by the twisted, smoking wreckage of the abominations, their once menacing forms reduced to little more than scrap metal and charred flesh. A hush fell over the reactor chamber, the sudden silence seeming almost deafening in the wake of the cataclysmic battle that had raged within its confines. Ava felt her knees buckle, the sheer exertion of channeling such unfathomable power leaving her drained and trembling. Zara was the first to approach, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and trepidation, as she took in the devastation that surrounded them. "By the gods," she breathed, her voice laced with a rare note of reverence. "What was that?"
Tali stepped forward, her tattered cloak swirling around her like smoke caught in an unseen breeze. "That, my dear Zara," she said, her voice rich with a quiet pride, "was the true power of unity, the boundless potential that lies within us all when we cast aside our differences and embrace the bonds that bind us together."
Ava felt a surge of pride swell within her chest, a sense of accomplishment that transcended mere physical boundaries. She had faced the crucible head-on, her spirit forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by the bonds of unity that had bound her to her comrades.
As she looked around at the faces of those who had stood by her side, she saw a newfound respect shining in their eyes, a recognition of the warrior she had become, a protector, a guardian of all that they held dear. And in that moment, Ava knew that she had truly transcended the boundaries of her past self, emerging from the crucible reborn, a beacon of hope and resilience, her spirit burning brighter than 1,000 stars. Chapter 6. Transcendence. The aftermath of the battle hung heavy in the air, the acrid tang of scorched metal and ozone permeating the vast chamber that housed the Celestial Voyager's reactor core. Ava stood amidst the twisted wreckage of the vanquished abominations, her chest heaving with exertion as she struggled to catch her breath. Around her, The members of their unlikely alliance slowly gathered, their expressions ranging from awe to trepidation as they took in the scene of utter devastation that surrounded them. Zara was the first to approach, her eyes wide as she surveyed the smouldering remains of the twisted monstrosities that had sought to overwhelm them. "By the gods!" the lithe warrior breathed, her voice laced with a rare note of reverence. "What in the nine hells was that?" Ava opened her mouth to respond, but the words seemed to catch in her throat as the full weight of what had transpired settled upon her. She had tapped into a wellspring of power unlike anything she had ever experienced, a boundless energy that had flowed through her like a raging torrent, amplifying her abilities beyond anything she could have imagined. As she struggled to find the words to explain the inexplicable, Tali stepped forward, her tattered cloak swirling around her like smoke caught in an unseen breeze. The enigmatic woman's gaze held a weight of understanding that seemed to transcend mere mortal boundaries, her eyes shining with a depth of knowledge that sent a shiver down Ava's spine. "What you witnessed, my dear Zara," Tali said, her rich voice carrying a note of quiet pride, "was the true power of unity, the boundless potential that lies within us all when we cast aside our differences and embrace the bonds that bind us together." Varlin stepped forward, his weathered features etched with a mixture of awe and skepticism. "You're telling me that Kerensky here just tapped into some kind of cosmic energy field?" The grizzled captain's gaze swept over the devastation that surrounded them, his brow furrowed in contemplation. Tali fixed Valen with a piercing stare, her expression inscrutable. "The universe is far more vast and mysterious than any of us can truly comprehend, Captain," she replied, her words laced with a weight of conviction that brooked no argument. "The energy that flows through all things is a tapestry woven from the very fabric of existence itself. Those who possess the courage and resilience to embrace its currents can tap into a wellspring of power that transcends mere physical boundaries." Ava felt a surge of understanding wash over her, a profound clarity that seemed to cut through the fog of confusion and uncertainty that had enveloped her in the wake of the battle. She had not simply unleashed some primal force or harnessed the power of advanced technology. No, what she had experienced was something far more profound, a connection to the very essence of existence itself, a unity that bound all things together in a harmonious tapestry of energy and potential. As she looked around at the faces of her comrades, she saw a newfound respect shining in their eyes, a recognition of the warrior she had become, a protector, a guardian of all that they held dear. But more than that, she saw a glimmer of understanding, a realization that they too possessed the capacity to transcend the boundaries of their mortal forms and embrace the power that flowed through the very fabric of the universe. Zara was the first to step forward, her eyes alight with a newfound determination that seemed to burn brighter than the reactor core itself. "If what you say is true," the warrior woman said, her voice laced with a steely resolve, "then teach me. Show me how to tap into this power, this unity that you speak of." Tali regarded Zara with a knowing gaze, a ghost of a smile playing across her features. "Very well," she said, her voice carrying a weight of conviction that seemed to resonate through the chamber. "But be warned, the path to transcendence is not an easy one. It requires a strength of spirit and a resilience of mind that few possess." Zara met Tali's gaze unflinchingly, her jaw set in a grim line. "I'm ready," she said, her words carrying a weight of conviction that brooked no argument. As Tali began to guide Zara through the first steps of her journey towards transcendence, Ava felt a profound sense of pride swell within her. She had not only faced her own crucible and emerged victorious, but she had also become a catalyst for others to embrace the boundless potential that lay within them. Valen stepped up beside her, his weathered features etched with a mixture of awe and contemplation. "I've seen a lot of strange things in my time, Lieutenant," he said, his voice laced with a rare note of reverence. "But this is something else entirely." Ava turned to face the grizzled captain, her eyes shining with a newfound depth of understanding. "It's more than just power, sir," she replied, her voice carrying a weight of conviction that seemed to resonate through her very being. "It's a connection, a unity that binds us all together, a tapestry woven from the very fabric of existence itself." Valen nodded slowly, his gaze sweeping over the devastation that surrounded them. "And you were able to tap into that?" he asked, his brow furrowed in contemplation. "To wield that kind of power?" Ava felt a surge of energy coursing through her veins, a palpable reminder of the boundless potential that now lay within her grasp. "Not just me, sir," she said, her voice laced with a quiet confidence that seemed to catch Valen off guard. "All of us. We're all connected, part of the same tapestry. We just need to have the courage to embrace it." As the words left her lips, Ava felt a profound sense of clarity wash over her. She had transcended the boundaries of her former self, emerging from the crucible of adversity reborn, a warrior, a protector, and a beacon of hope for all those who dared to embrace the boundless potential that flowed through the very fabric of the universe. Valen regarded her with a newfound respect, a glimmer of understanding flickering in his eyes. "Well, Lieutenant," he said, his voice laced with a rare note of warmth, "it seems you've come a long way from the timid engineer I met at the start of all this." Ava felt a surge of pride swell within her chest, a sense of accomplishment that transcended mere physical boundaries. "We all have, sir," she replied, her gaze sweeping over the members of their unlikely alliance. "We've faced our crucibles, our moments of truth, and we've emerged stronger for it. United." As she spoke those words, Ava felt a profound sense of purpose take root within her soul. She was no longer simply a protector of the Celestial Voyager and its inhabitants. She was a beacon, a guiding light that would lead others towards the path of transcendence and unity. With a deep breath, she turned to face her comrades, her eyes shining with a newfound resolve that seemed to burn brighter than the reactor core itself. "The battle may be over," she said, her voice carrying a weight of conviction that commanded attention, "but our journey is just beginning. We stand at the threshold of a new era, one where the boundaries of our mortal forms are transcended and the true power of unity is embraced." Tali stepped forward, her tattered cloak swirling around her like smoke caught in an unseen breeze. "Well spoken, Lieutenant," she said, her rich voice laced with a quiet pride. "You have proven yourself worthy of the mantle you now bear, a warrior of the infinite, a guardian of the tapestry that binds us all together." Ava felt a surge of energy coursing through her veins, a palpable reminder of the boundless potential that now lay within her grasp. She was no longer simply a protector, a warrior forged in the fires of adversity. She was a conduit, a bridge between the mortal realm and the infinite expanse of energy and potential that permeated the very fabric of existence. As she looked around at the faces of her comrades, she saw a newfound fire burning in their eyes, a determination to embrace the path of transcendence and unity that lay before them. They were no longer a disparate band of misfits and outcasts, but a cohesive force, bound together by a shared purpose and a newfound understanding of the tapestry that wove them all together. With a deep breath, Ava squared her shoulders, her gaze sweeping over the assembled gathering, with a quiet confidence that seemed to radiate from her very being. "The road ahead will not be easy," she said, her voice carrying a weight of conviction that brooked no argument. "But we will walk it together, united in purpose, and fortified by the bonds that transcend mere flesh and steel." A chorus of nods and murmurs of assent rippled through the group, a palpable sense of unity and determination settling over them like a mantle. They had faced their crucibles, their moments of truth, and emerged victorious, not through force of arms alone, but through the power of unity and the indomitable strength of the human spirit. As Ava turned to face the vast expanse of the reactor core, she felt a surge of energy coursing through her veins, a boundless wellspring of potential that seemed to flow from the very fabric of the universe itself. She was no longer simply a protector, a guardian of the Celestial Voyager and its inhabitants. She was a warrior of the infinite, a beacon of hope and transcendence, and her journey was just beginning.